Streaming at WMEXBoston.com. And on your smart speaker, just say play WMEX.
The greatest hits of all time are back. This is the all-new WMEX.
WMEX Boston.
Chris Shea's Financial Puzzle Plan is a show dedicated to helping you understand your financial path and the puzzle pieces that build it. Join us each week as Chris explores various topics in the financial industry with his guests and your calls at 781-834-9639. Here's your host, Chris Shea of BPS Financial Services.
Yeah, we'll let Dr. John roll for a little bit there. Can't get too much Dr. John, especially on a cold night here in New England. Brings me back to my days when I lived in New Orleans and got to see the good doctor before he passed away a couple of years ago. He put on actually a free show when I graduated from Tulane. Good times, good memories. But that's the past, and the future is ahead of us, and hopefully we can help you to put together the puzzle of your financial future. And this is the first Tuesday of the month. I'm already into my second month here on WMEX, and some of you may actually have listened last time. Hopefully you did.
Time flies. I tell you, they grow up so fast, folks.
Yeah, it's incredible. Beautiful. In my first month, it was educational for me and hopefully entertaining for some of you. And I think I got a little bit better at this. Hopefully we'll see if I continue to improve. This first Tuesday of the month is supposed to be designed for real estate, and we're supposed to have Leon Marion of Compass Real Estate come in and meet with us and chat with us. And Leon decided that, well, actually he didn't decide. His company decided that it would be good for him to get training in Oklahoma City this week. So he's actually probably in between Denver and Oklahoma City on a plane right now.
Sounds super convenient, by the way.
Oh, decidedly convenient. So he and I chatted about it, and he's like, "Oh, should I just get a realtor?" I'm like, "No, we want to focus on helping, the demographics of WMAX, which tend to err on the boomer side of things, and continue with a real estate specialist that's much like Leon." So he reached out to a colleague of his that is about as far away from here as you possibly can be and still be in the continental United States, down in San Diego, California. So I'm going to let you bring in here Richard. I'm going to let Richard introduce himself and let you know about what he does and as a senior real estate specialist, kind of what that is again, because, well, what they do is a little bit different than your average everyday realtor that just kind of sets it up, has an open house, and hopes and prays that people show up. So, Richard, how are things in San Diego?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Chris. And you're absolutely right. There's definite differences there, and I'm excited to dive into that with you guys and talk a little bit more about it and about what we do as senior real estate specialists. But things are going great here in San Diego. I am sitting outside in some nice weather and just enjoying, catching up on what you guys are doing. And yes, I am a realtor in San Diego. Been here my whole life.
You just made half of our audience really mad because it's literally going to be 25 degrees tomorrow.
It's 35 right now, and there are light flurries out here in Broadcast House Studios in Boston.
Well, I should apologize for that.
We forgive you. It's okay.
We'll talk about L.A. in a little bit, too, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Gotta laugh about it, though, because I did the same thing when I lived in New Orleans and Los Angeles. What's the weather like back in Boston?
Yeah. I know everyone asks, so I just like to get it out of the way up front because, they may not be wanting to ask, but they do. And they might not like the answer that always comes from the weather question here. But yes, no, I totally understand that.
You got your wonderful June gloom there, so it's not completely perfect.
You're right. Yeah, exactly. We've got to have something.
We'll take it. So I'm sure you can tell us some of the differences that the San Diego market must look like in comparison to Boston. Not exactly two similar cities, am I correct?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'm not too much of an expert in Boston by any means, but I know Leon Marion and have conversations with him. And yeah, I mean, as far as the San Diego market goes, it's definitely seen some slowdown. We're seeing as rates start to come down, buyers start to dip their toes back in with interest, but no one's in a rush. And prices are staying fairly stable. Sellers are digging their heels in still, which typically happens this time of year. And, I think everyone's looking forward to going into the new year with some new inventory, new spark back in some of the buyers' sentiment, and just to always see that bit of a refresh in the market. And I'm sure it's pretty similar out there as you get into the new year a little bit, but very much so here. The holidays is a big slowdown. And
nobody wants to move. Nobody wants to move around the holidays. Nobody wants to make that big life choice usually, unless they absolutely have to around the holidays. It's kind of like the start of the school year, right? Like nobody wants to be moving in August with kids going back to school, and that you want to get that move done months beforehand in June, July at the latest, so you can actually get settled into that new school district.
Exactly, and that's for the planners, the people that make sure they're planning and talking to professionals, and I know that's what you guys deal with on the financial side, so it's always important to have plans because you don't want to find yourself stuck in the wrong time of the market either on a needs-based type sale.
Yeah.
So
we've established that you lived in San Diego and your weather's great. How did you wind up getting into not just real estate, but the senior real estate specialist role? What drew you to that? Because my mom was a realtor for 35 years. She didn't specialize as a senior real estate specialist. What prompted you to want to do it? And again, I don't judge realtors good or bad for wanting to do it. Just curious so that people can understand the why behind what you and people that do get the designation usually bring to the table.
Absolutely. So I got my start in business rather young. When I was 19, I started an ambulance transportation company here in San Diego, and we basically dealt with the elder care homes, so assisted living, skilled nursing facilities, and hospitals transporting patients to and from appointments or to and from the emergency room. And I ran that company for about 6 years, which just gave me a whole world of it and wealth of experience in dealing with seniors and older adults, and truly befriended a lot along the way, and had just a great understanding for what their specific needs are and how they should be approached. And that's obviously with a lot of patience, integrity, guidance, and things that are just so important to that demographic. Not necessarily because they're vulnerable, but because it's something they're deserving of and a respect that they deserve. And it's difficult to keep up with some of the changing environment. And so having an advisor that's really looking out for their best interest is important. And so I ran that company, and when I closed it down, I had always been interested in real estate, and it was a little bit of a hard of a transition for me mentally because I came from something that I felt like I had so much purpose in, to what, the typical reason for people get into real estate is, hey, go make money for yourself and go make a name for yourself. And it was hard for me to relate to that. And so when I first got into the industry, I knew I wanted to do more. And I just have a passion for working with seniors. And as I started, into my career, I just saw such a great need for senior-specific advisors in real estate. And one of the main reasons for that is, oftentimes they can be approached as targets in some senses, whether it's an investor or even a very innocent, hungry agent looking for a deal, and not necessarily as a target, but just a lack of education can, put them in a difficult situation. And so I just really developed a passion for changing the way older adults are approached in real estate. And in doing so, I think it really opens up the doors for helping those older adults really find what is important to them, which could be not selling their house. It could be finding a way to stay in their home. And there's a lot of financial considerations that people don't think about. And so when someone becomes a senior designated, senior real estate specialist, there's people that are in everything for the right reason and the wrong reason. It's always hard to decipher, but I think that there's a definite barrier to being a true advocate, and that is just a level of care and compassion for the demographic you're working with. And that's just been the drive for me, and I've seen a lot of just amazing things transpire from working with other individuals with similar passions, and how older adults can really be helped through something that is a difficult process.
Yeah, I can appreciate most all of that. I do have a question for you, though, that it's going to, again, we don't know each other very well. Leon just kind of introduced us today because he realized that he was going to be in the air, and it's like, I don't want to leave you hanging, Chris. And I said, that's fine. He's like, no, I got a guy. I'm like, all right, of course you got a guy. But one of the things that I do that isn't necessarily something that is my prime business, but it relates to it. I do a presentation for the Alzheimer's Association on managing money. And it talks about people dealing with Alzheimer's and the caregivers for that and steps people need to take. And it's wonderful. I didn't put it together, but I do take statistics from it. And one of the questions that comes up in the middle of the presentation that you kind of touched on a little bit is, seniors being taken advantage of. They have a question on there where the average senior, how much money do they get swindled out of every year, right? And so they give 4 choices: $5,000, 15 grand, 25 grand, or 40 grand. How much do you think the average senior gets swindled and taken for on an annual basis?
My thought is it would tend towards that higher number, 25 or 40 grand, for a number of reasons. I think there's just so many avenues.
Yep, and the average senior gets taken for $40,000 a year.
Wow.
Give or take a couple shillings, right? Yep. And yeah, people, when I do the presentation, go, just like you did, wow. And it's not necessarily always people that they don't know. A lot of time it's friends and family, right? I talk about my family a lot and my parents. My brother had some challenges with some addiction issues, and he would come by and he chopped down a tree, and then my mom would be like, hey, clean it up. And he's like, okay, great. I need $1,000. And she'd be like, okay, great. Go chop up the tree. He'd work for like half an hour and then leave. He'd come back and ask for another $1,000 a week later because of life and whatever. And next thing you know, he never got the job done, and she gave him a lot of money. Before she passed, he never finished it. I actually had to do the work to sell our house because it was such a disaster. But that counts towards the getting money taken from you. And it's not just, the big ones. I think there was something online recently where here in Massachusetts, there was outrage in the news because a elder got taken for $100,000, and it became big news of like the scheme and stuff. But the reality is, a lot of the time, it's family members and people that they think they can trust, because there's a gravy train there. And I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of situations where the parent has one of the kids living with them and essentially mooching off of them.
Yep.
And there's a need for the parent to take care of the child, which I completely understand. I've got a 13-year-old daughter. I want to take care of my daughter however she needs me to show up for her. But I've also got to look out for myself at the same time, right? You've got the ability to manage both and not lose completely as the senior. But sometimes you've got to step in and have that tough conversation as an advisor to someone and say, hey, look, we know you don't want your kid living on the street, but you're living in a bad situation here in your household, and you need to move on to a better living situation, and your kids got to fend for themselves. Do you come across that often?
Yeah, absolutely do. And I think as humans, we're programmed to live in the now and now decisions and things that are right in front of us. And I think that's why so many older adults fall into that, especially with family, because of course they want to care for their kids, and of course they want to provide and continue to be that sort of rock for them. But that's where I think the professional steps in, is maybe not as much in those day-to-day decisions, but as the planner, and let's get this set up for you, and so you do have a goal or maybe something to be a consideration when you are making those decisions. Whether it's, hey, when the money runs out, what am I going to do for care? Or if I outlive my plan, what's happening? And oftentimes, real estate is one of their biggest assets financially. And so having a plan helps, at least give them some sort of verbiage or something to hang on to in some of those day-to-day decisions where, they may think, oh, of course, I do have this money here. I should help my kids. Well, maybe that's allocated, and maybe that's a longer conversation with your kids. And so I do see it a lot, and I think it's mainly around a lack of education. And so when a professional can come alongside and just understand what their needs are, understand what it looks like to live a flourishing life for them in end of life days, what's important to them, it's helpful for them to see a bigger picture. Because going back to what you said about the $40,000 a year, I am not shocked by that at all, sadly. And just
it doesn't shock
here
you,
in
right?
San Diego,
That's
it doesn't
completely
shock me.
shocking.
Yeah, it's a very shocking number, but when you see it, when you're in it and you understand the industry, you understand it, and that's the sad thing. And, just in San Diego alone, home prices are so high, a senior can easily be taken for $500,000 on their property value without even knowing it. Just maybe falling prey to an investor that's sending a cash offer that's well below what the value is, and things like that they're making now decisions. And having somebody to help them sort through those things is very important.
Yeah, and there's urgencies and priorities, right? And one of the things that I talk about with my clients is distinguishing between an urgency and a priority, right? And money invariably is a priority, right? If you've got a job and you've got income coming in and you think you're okay, your money really isn't an urgency. It's a priority that you get it right, but whether or not you get it right, you're probably going to be relatively okay for the next month, right? Like, things aren't going to fall apart as long as you're working and bringing in money. Whereas the urgency is you come home and the trash needs to get taken out. You come home and it's 6 o'clock at night, 6:30 p.m., and the kids are screaming for food. Those are urgencies that need to get filled. And the priorities, getting your finances in order, figuring out how you're going to take care of your future lives, that all gets pushed to the background because, oh, wait, again, not your problem out in San Diego, but our problem here is there's going to be potentially snow tomorrow morning, and it's going to be frosty, and oh gosh, it's going to be really, really, really cold. And so now the urgency is preparing for that. With it being the holiday season, another urgency is gifts, right? Everyone wants to go out and shop and get those gifts for their kids and grandkids and loved ones and significant others. And those feel like urgencies, but a lot of the times the priorities of it get out of whack a little bit. I was on a networking call actually right before this with a woman out of St. Louis, and we were talking about she has 5 kids and five or six. I forget if it was 5 or 6, and 14 grandkids. And she was talking about her grandkids. Some of the 13-year-old girls are asking for $1,000 gifts, and she's like, she told me, she's like, I'm handing these lists back to their parents and being like, you do realize I have 14 grandkids, and if they're getting each $100 gift, that's $1,400 in gifts just to the grandkids, right? Like that's
Yeah.
Never mind asking for $1,000 gift. Now I'm going to talk about $14,000, which is a couple months' mortgage for a lot of people, right? Like that's a significant amount of money for just gifts for just one of the generations, not even the kids and their significant others, but that's just the grandkids. The people spending around trying to appease people can sometimes be a challenge. She actually, I want to make sure I get this right, so it's going to take me a second to get it back in my head. Oh, she would ask her kids when they were growing up, are you a producer or a consumer? And, right? So are you producing income that helps us buy stuff, or are you just consuming things? And if you're a producer, you can set the rules. But if you're a consumer, you got to live by the producer's rules and, deal with it. And if you don't like it, well, go produce your own income and then spend your money your way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great advice, too. I really love what you said about the urgencies versus priorities. I think that has so many great applications. And, the business I run here is called Flourish Senior. And the idea or the mission behind it is that, the end of life should be categorized amongst the best years of life. And what does that look like for older adults? And having that as a priority and understanding that it's not necessarily the home you've lived in for years that is the place that you will flourish, or maybe it's community, maybe it is being closer to family. Those are the priority type conversations that they should be having, and urgencies get in the way. And sometimes even being in the wrong home causes urgencies that can greatly impact financial issues, whether it's, this is just an older home and there's plumbing issues that we're paying a lot of money to put Band-Aids on, or other things that arise in older homes that are not translating dollar for what the home value is. And some of those things are important considerations too when you're dealing with urgencies and what your priorities are. And I just think it's important that, one, we understand the emotional process behind that. It's a very hard thing to make certain decisions that maybe are in line with priorities, but are an emotional decision to make for urgency sense. And having that mindset is just a really helpful thing, and I think that's a great tool to use to just continue to check in on where your values and priorities lie and how your current situation is tending to that. So I really like that.
Yeah, and one of the things that you said there was emotional, right?
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, if I was just dealing with people's money, my job would be the easiest job in the world. because the investments are the investments, the numbers are the numbers. I have no real control over how the investment markets perform. I can just kind of set a course and steer it in what we think is the right direction. And not to get too deep into the investment portion of this, but asset allocation and the asset classes that people are invested in is like 90% of your performance returns. 9% of it is the actual investment that you choose. And like 1% is timing and 1% is just dumb luck. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, you just kind of make big macro choices in what you're doing, and your investments are the easy part. The hard part is dealing with people and their emotions. And one of the things I like to ask people when I start to work with them, I said, and I'll ask you this question, Richard. So I want your opinion on this. But what's your definition of money? It's a good question, isn't it?
It's a great question. The way I've always looked at it is simply a tool. And I could expound a bit, but I know that's a very common, I guess, very broad answer. But it really is a tool, and it obviously has a grip on it being the tool that's used for living in a lot of senses. It doesn't give you life, but it moves you through life. And so money is an important thing, and it's an important thing to be very intentional about. But the way I see it, and I'm younger, and so I have a career ahead of me where, I think that it's easy for many people to look at money as the goal when it should be the tool. And hopefully that explains it a little bit better than just how broad that was, but that would probably be my answer.
No, that's a great answer. I actually really like that one. This is the one I usually give. This is the one I give to people. This is my definition of money. Money is the material way in which we purchase and consume our current and future needs, wants, wishes, and desires. Right? And so if you think about it, the needs are obviously needs. Like you need a shelter, you need food. But the wishes, wants, and desires, that's all emotional stuff. And people will come to me and be like, I'm emotional about my money. And I say, yes, you are, and you should be. And they look at me like, wait, what? Huh? You think this is normal? I say, yeah, it's normal. Because if your money is your needs, wants, wishes, and desires for your current and future purchases, all of that is emotional stuff that feeds your soul and your well-being. Money is not the end goal. Money is the way in which you consume the stuff that makes you happy in your life. And once I get through to people that they're actually good being emotional with their money, they chuckle and they say, so I'm normal? I'm like, yeah, well, you in that sense. Can't say I'm normal in everything else. That's for a therapist to decide. But if you're emotional about your money, you're right where you should be.
That's a great thing to bring up, and it's one of those things I feel like where it's like once you recognize it, then you can use it in the right way. So it's so easy to just brush aside that I shouldn't be emotional about my money. But once you accept the fact that you should be, now you can use that, channel that energy in the right direction. So then you become good at being emotional about your money and whatever that looks like for you. But I think that people are bad at being emotional about their money because they aren't accepting that you should be emotional about your money.
Yep.
So
that
great.
is correct. Yeah, no, it's definitely one of those things where you again, once you point it out and people go, oh, really? Wow, you're not mad at me for being emotional? No, I expect you to be emotional. My job as an advisor is to step in and take that emotion out of the equation as much as I can by providing facts. Right?
Yep.
So with that, I am going to take a break here for a couple minutes. We're going to let our sponsors get on and put in a couple of ads here, but we'll be back. I got Richard from San Diego. If you got any real estate questions and about the process of what an elder senior real estate specialist does, we'll be happy to answer those, and we'll get into a little bit of the details of kind of what a senior real estate specialist provides aside from just opening up the doors and selling your house. Are you fit to retire? I'm Chris Shea, financial advisor at BPS Financial Services in Marshfield. I work with clients to create a 100-day plan that can help get you started so that you can get the most out of your retirement. You've worked your whole life towards your goal of retirement. Let BPS Financial Services put together a plan that will help you enjoy your retirement. Find out how a 100-day plan tailored to you can help you get started in your retirement at fit2retire.com/Chris-Shea or call 781-733-5996. That's 781-733-5996. And now for my fast red disclosure, as this has been compliance approved.
Chris Shea is a registered representative offering securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity, located at 752 Ocean Street, Marshfield, Massachusetts, 02050.
Hi, my name is Kyle, and I'm one of the owners of Austin Insurance Agency. Let's be real, your insurance premiums have skyrocketed since the pandemic, and many families are having a hard time finding affordable coverage. We have access to over 50 insurance carriers at our 2 convenient locations. One's in Hingham, near Derby Street Shopping Mall, and another is in Whitman on Route 18. We are a third-generation insurance agency, and since 1964, we have helped thousands of families find an affordable solution. It costs you nothing for us to review your policy, but it might if you don't. Austin Insurance Agency. Our family protecting yours. Contact us at 781-447-5561. Also online at austininsurance.com.
Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to refinance, don't waste time sifting through countless mortgage options. At MBA Mortgage, our licensed loan officers do the work for you. We shop the best rates from top lenders and tailor a mortgage solution just for you. Trust the experts at MBA Mortgage and call Matt Scott at 781-849-1118 or visit our website at www.mbamortgageteam.com. Your home, your future, your choice. MBA Mortgage has mastered the business of mortgages. And don't forget to check me out on Tuesdays during Chris Shea's Financial Puzzle Plan at 6 o'clock on WMEX.
Welcome back to Chris Shea's Financial Puzzle Plan here on 1510 WMEX, 101.1 FM Quincy, and online at WMEXBoston.com.
That's right, and the phone number to join in the conversation and harass myself or Richard is 781-834-9639. That's 781-834-9639. If you want to talk about real estate or you just want to give him junk about living in San Diego and how bad the Chargers looked, and although the Patriots didn't look much better, but yeah, it was a tough weekend for football around here, and about the only thing we have to look forward to is the fact that we're going to get a draft choice in the near future. But yeah, no, you heard a couple ads on there that in a couple weeks on the 19th we'll have our good friend Matt from MBA Mortgage will be on, and then on the 26th we'll have Kyle on. Next week we have Ben Cody from Stiles Law to talk about estate planning. But this week, as for the financial puzzle, we are trying to talk a little bit more about real estate. And the fact that, when a senior is looking to move, it's really challenging. My mom, like I said a couple times on this station, was a realtor for 35 years. And her house, after she passed away, I cleaned it out. I had 6 30-yard dumpsters of stuff that we just kind of threw away. But she had held on to a lot of it. There was stuff in the attic. There was stuff in the backyard. There's stuff everywhere. And it was a challenge for me to get through it. And I literally had to go through piece by piece of all the paperwork, and there was a ton of it. Because there was gold in there. I found one thing that was family line of my mom's side, going back to 1817 or something like that, from my great-great-great-great-grandfather immigrating from Poland. So there were some gems in there, but there was a lot of stuff that was just stuff. And I know for me and my mom, she thought that the stuff was her life, and she wanted to give a lot of it to me. But I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it as stuff, and the memories were the memories, which were wonderful for the most part. You know, there's some bad things in there. Nobody's ever perfect. But when it comes to getting into somebody's home and starting to have that conversation about downsizing, that word that is out there a lot, how do you approach that for your clients, and how do you think it should be approached, Richard, for people who are looking to downsize out of their big home into a smaller place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I like all the things you brought up from your personal experience, because I think that's really helpful for the listeners, and just to understand how difficult that process can be, whether the person is alive and going through that, or deceased and the family is going through that. And so when it comes to downsizing specifically, the term we like to use with some of our clients is right sizing. And, because downsizing to them sometimes has a negative connotation of, I am getting rid of important things in my life to make this sacrificial move, when you really try to look at what is right for you. What are the limitations of your current home, and can those be addressed for your activities of daily living, or are those things that there's just needs to be changes made? And I think when you really walk somebody through the decision-making process slowly, it tends to lead to a much smoother process emotionally. So I think the important part for all people dealing with seniors and decision-making processes is just patience, and understanding that, the time that it takes to come to a decision is different for everybody. And as they step into the emotional process of making that decision, and then not only is that part emotional, now the action steps. So now we're at the house going through things. We're deciding what's going to go, what's going to stay. How are we going to make changes to help your home be worth the most for you, so you can take that money into your next place or your long-term care plan? And sometimes even just those changes that are recommended by a real estate agent can be, emotional. Oh, you're going to paint this wall that we picked this color, for a specific reason, and it's very sentimental to me. And those sort of things, they just take time, and it's important to remember that. And to also give and take when you're going through those situations. And sometimes there's compromises that need to be made on both sides. And sometimes there's times where you're going through stuff with them that they're just not ready to let go of yet. And so the point is, it can be a very drawn-out process. But when you help them understand the importance of it for their priorities, they get very much on board. And I've just had many situations where it was an emotional process, but the end result, they're in tears for the gratefulness and the gratitude that they have for you leading them through it professionally, because they feel such a relief for being in the right place. And when you have that goal in mind and you continue to point them towards that, it's just the care that they need in that situation.
Yeah, and I think I know for me, and again, I lean on my experience. Yes, I was in my late 40s. I'm 51 now. But, and there's always a but, I was still the 4, 5, 6-year-old kid in my mother's eyes who didn't know anything about anything. And when I made recommendations to her, she'd say, "You don't know what you're talking about. And I'd be like, but I'm a professional. Like, I do this for a living. I help people. And I'd look at her and be like, and you're a realtor, and you look at this house as a, objective realtor. Like, can you see what you need? And she's like, but it's my house, and I can do what I want. And I'm like, okay, we slipped into the emotional part, and she still sees me as her kid.
Yeah. Yes, that is common. That's very common. And one of the things I was going to mention is it's important as the senior real estate specialist to include family when it's appropriate and when the client has that desire. And sometimes it's a really important thing to include family, kids, and such. And sometimes it's not what the senior desires. So it's a hard balance to walk. But I think that the emotional process goes so deep, and that's the nice thing about having an outside perspective. So as a senior real estate specialist and someone who, focuses on helping seniors walk through this time, it's a bit easier to approach than just the neighborhood realtor at times. And I think that's important consideration for family when they're making, suggestions and stuff having to do with real estate, is to really find someone that does have that extra level of care and understanding in that situation, because I think that you'll find they do have the experience to walk them through the decision in a different way, in a professional way, in a way that comes from experience, from doing it multiple times. And that is just a good tool for family members when they're really trying to understand what's going to be the best for their parent, to seek out a professional in that. And I know you'd say the same thing on the financial advising side, where it's just sometimes having that outside perspective, someone that you can trust will lead them to the correct decision, is a very important piece.
Yeah, and then I think... do you very frequently have the kids bring you to the parents too, to try and make the case?
It does happen, yes. And oftentimes they've already had conversations, of course. It's not, I've never come in cold and, hey, surprise, I've got a real estate agent here. But it's usually,
hey, Mom, pack your bags, I'm booting you out.
Exactly. That's never happened, and, I kind of hope it doesn't. But, I definitely have had the kids make the connection and say, listen, my mom's not quite ready for this yet, so I really want you to go into this carefully, but, we've all talked and we think this is the best for her. And, coming into those meetings with that is very common, because they're starting the slow process of the decision-making for them. And now at that point in the process, it's time to bring in a professional to reiterate, or maybe I'll have a different opinion than the kids after talking to them, but that's why we're a professional, so we can really walk them through that. And so when definitely does happen, and in those situations, it's almost primed for you to just take it slow and really listen and understand and listen to the memories that they share about the home and why they think that this is the best home on the block and should sell for $150,000 more than the rest, and all those things that come up in those conversations. That's just your time to listen, and then the advice comes later. So it is common.
Yeah, I chuckle because one of the things that I try and do with people is to get them to tell me what their actual needs want, actually what their wishes and wants are, right? And be honest and truthful about it. And sometimes, I know from, again, I'm going to use my family, but my mom, 3 years after my father had passed away, she still had his clothes sitting out. And I know you can't see me on the radio, but I'm all of 5'9" and 190 pounds this morning. So, average size guy, not huge, not small, just, kind of average. My dad was 6'1", 300 pounds. Big old belly. He was Santa Claus. He had a big white beard, and he actually did Santa Claus for the Cardinal Cushing School. It's a school for children with disabilities here. He, and it's holiday season, so I have great memories about this. But the Cardinal Cushing, it was done for the Massachusetts State Police. And my dad lived in Hanover. The Cardinal Cushing School was in the same town. If you walk there, it would take you maybe half an hour, door to door. And, so the event was starting at like 10 a.m. and the police, state police officer from the town was like, hey, I'm going to pick you up at 8 a.m. for this event. And my dad's like, what are you talking about? Like, the event's right there. He's like, I don't need 2 hours to get there. I can crawl there in 2 hours. He's like, no, I'm gonna pick you up. So the trooper picks up my dad, drives him out to Worcester, which, for those of us in Massachusetts, it's about an hour drive, hour and 15 minutes. And my dad's like, what's going on? Well, for the Massachusetts State Police at this event, Santa arrives in a helicopter. So they threw my dad into a helicopter, and there's pictures of my dad that I still have of him hanging out the window or hanging out the door of the helicopter, strapped in. Santa Claus is waving to the kids at this school, at Cardinal Cushing School. So great memories of my father. But I would never in 1,000,001 years fit into his clothes. It just wouldn't happen. He was too big for me to ever have him. My mom's like, do you want his clothes? And I'm like, I took a couple of his T-shirts and I kept them. And like a year later, I'm like, none of these even fit me. Like, why do I have them? I kept some of his ties, and some of the other stuff. But the clothes just didn't fit. They would never fit. I'm never going to be 6'1". I'm going in the opposite direction. I'm, 5'8", 5'9" now, getting shorter every month as we age. But my mom felt like the clothes were what the memories were. But for me, it was the stories of my dad and Santa Claus and the persona that he had and the zest for life that he had. The stuff was just a weight for me, as opposed to what my mom thought it was. The stuff was where the memories were tied into, and I could never get her to move off of that.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing. It almost can feel like a betrayal to get rid of certain things in that emotional state, and having somebody really guide you through that can be very helpful. And there's even companies out there that many senior real estate specialists are connected with that only focus on that, move management, and helping seniors walk through the downsizing process and the emotional process.
No, the right sizing process. The right sizing process. You said I tricked you into using that word.
That's right. You got me. But yeah, it's the right sizing process, and and oftentimes it's little tips like, why don't we keep this one shirt that was really meaningful, and this can be a representative for these memories, or certain things like that. And oftentimes the things we like to do for our clients when selling their home is do a really great video or something that really captures what they say the story of their home is, and we focus our real estate video on that story, so it's something they can take with them, and little things like that, or perhaps commissioning an artist to do a watercolor of the listing photo, little things that they can take with them that capture the memory, really capture the memory, but is not the physical thing. So, and that's why it's a process. So that's why it takes time and just a lot of working through. And, the more you could focus on the goal, like you said, the closer you'll get there.
Yeah, I think one of the words that you use a bunch that people need to hear again, in spite of the fact that you've said it a lot, is process, right? You don't wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to sell my house.
Yeah.
This is something, and again, I go back to my discussion the presentation I do for the Alzheimer's Association in managing money, and they talk about, in one of the videos, they have a woman that comes on, and she talks about how, in order for their parent to finally open up about their money and how to help them manage it, it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. It was a lot of questions, and sometimes it was buttering them up and saying, hey, I love what you do with your finances. Can you teach me how to do it, to become better at it, right? Or figuring out a way to make them feel like they're the ones in charge, because as people get up with Alzheimer's, it they're no longer functioning. They can't take care of themselves in a lot of the cases, and it's extraordinarily sad. But to get someone to take over the finances, it's a challenge and a process. And the selling of a home, and my parents, my parents were married for 49 years and 50 weeks. My dad died 2 weeks short of their 50th wedding anniversary. So my mom had a lot of memories tied up in that. And in the house, they had moved there my senior in high school in 1989. So I really had no attachment to the house. It was their home. It was my mom's dream house. My house was the one that we sold to my cousins, because that's the one I grew up in until I was literally a senior in high school. So for me, there was no attachment to the house. It wasn't a home. But my parents had lived there for 30 plus years, which meant they had 30 plus years of stuff and their memories as a couple, and with my younger brother, and they were pillars in the community. I mean, my mom, I got a email last month. The town library, 2 years after my mother passed away, almost 3 years, it'll be 3 years in March, had a sign said, "Thank you" to my mom. 2.5, 3 years after she passed away, from the library, saying thank you to her. I was like, oh my God, somebody emailed to me, because they were like, hey, you probably haven't seen this. And I'm like, super touching, because my mom put a lot of work into the library and in the town, and it was a big deal for her. And it made me really appreciate, the fact that the town recognized her. But that was also part of the reason why she never moved out of the house, because she had been a pillar of the community for more than 50 years, involved in everything under the sun, and she couldn't picture herself somewhere else.
Yep, absolutely. That is a big piece, and oftentimes it's the legacy. And I think, going back to what you talked about, how much of a process it is, that's why it requires being approached with grace, because we often don't know the reasons why it's hard for them to open up or allow people into their finances. Maybe it's insecurity about it, or maybe it's just the trust thing. And when we step into that with grace, understanding that there's probably some reasons that this is hard for them, it helps to break down those walls. And to your point of, having a plan, that's why a plan is so important. I know you guys will be talking about estate plans next month, and I think that's going to be a great topic for all you listeners to tune into, because having it all set up, it's about having those conversations early. And when those conversations are had early, it gives language to everybody involved to open up those conversations anytime. And that's the kind of communication that you really need. And when it's too late, it makes it very difficult to get the correct care that they need. And having that done early is so important. And having grace, and whatever reason it is hard for them to open up, is another important piece. So it's always hard to know what really is going on. It could be that they're worried about the legacy, or it could be that, they are insecure that they didn't plan early enough. And all those things can be factors. So, really getting on top of it with them early and stepping into it all with a lot of grace is very important.
Yeah, and I I talk with a lot of people that work in this sector, and another word that comes up in addition to grace is dignity. People want to be treated with dignity and respect that they have deserved and have earned in their lifetime, and there can be times where it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Particularly in a process
Absolutely.
where they're not necessarily driving the bus, right? And for a lot of people that have been in control of things their entire life, that tends to be one of the biggest challenges. Do you fly a lot, Richard? Have you flown a lot in the past? Or
Yes, I do.
Are you afraid of flying?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I flew for a long time. I was a consultant, and I traveled, and I was on a plane for a period of time there, at least twice a week, for 9 months straight. It was kind of crazy. But I got to talk to a bunch of the flight attendants, and we talked about people that were afraid of flying. And the common denominator that they saw was the people that were afraid of flying were always the control freaks.
Mm.
They had to be in control, and that was the fear. The fear was the lack of control if something were to go wrong, right? Like, they're not in control of the plane. They are just like, that control was what made them fearful of it. And I'm completely the opposite. I had an experience where when I was living in New Orleans, I came back to Boston to visit my parents, and the pilot landed the plane in Memphis, halfway there, because of something was wrong. Well, 2 hours later, they tried to get us on the plane. Then they said, no, we can't go on. Then they tried to get us on again. No, can't go on. Try to get us on the third time. No, can't get on. Finally, the fourth time, they're like, okay, we're really getting on this time. And this family that was sitting there, they're like, we're not getting on this plane. It's not safe. And I looked at them and I said, do you understand what just happened? The flight, the pilot of this plane just said 3 times, my life is more important than getting you home on time. Now I'm finally comfortable enough to fly. Let's get on the plane and go. That's the pilot I want every day of the week and twice whenever I'm flying with them.
Yeah.
Right. So, and for a lot of seniors, it comes down to the fear of losing control of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I relate. I don't relate to the flying fear because for some reason, I just trust the human mind. But I have the same thing with horses, where I think sitting on something that has a mind of its own that I don't understand is where I lose control. But I think that's a great analogy, and it's so true that the loss of control is hard, especially when you've maintained control your whole life. It's not a common thing for you to let go of. And you're in a vulnerable position when you do need to let go of it. And so it's a lifetime of learning to be in control and making the decision, and then stepping into something that's very different. And so the earlier you can practice that and engage with people that you trust, I think the easier that process will be for the older adult and for the family.
Yeah. Or if you can see this coming on the horizon, start the plans now.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Say, this is what I want to do. This is how I want it to happen. This is my approximate timeline, because nothing's going to be perfect. And
you could always change it.
Absolutely. The only constant in life is change, right? And so there will be changes, but you can make a big broad strokes of what you think is going to happen. And this is how you kind of want to, at a big picture, want to see it, right? When you want to retire, where you want to retire, where you want to move to in the next stage of your life, and how you want that to show up and how you want to interact with your family around it. So, we are closing up at the end of the hour here. Richard, anything you want to add as a last minute recommendation for people out there?
And how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say that it's, Compass is the number one brokerage in America, and having a senior-specific real estate agent is a really important consideration. And I will say Leon Marion, I really look up to him in this space. He's out in your area in Boston, and he's an excellent person to reach out to and be in contact with. And as far as reaching me, I have a website that I can send. It's homerichsd.com. And that's where my contact info is. Home Rich, my first name, Rich, SD for San Diego. And but as far as the Boston area, I want to say having a senior specialist is an important piece. And Compass has a lot of tools that other brokerages don't, that allow people to get the most out of their home without putting it up front the cost. And so that's just something that I would recommend asking a Leon about in that area, because there's just some really great helpful tools for that.
All right. Thank you much. This has been great. Appreciate it very much, and glad to have met you. We'll
you as well.
Catch you for the rest of you that are out there listening. Next week, we'll have Ben Cody online with us, and hopefully you'll have some comments, questions, concerns, cheap shots. Give us a call. Enjoy. Have a great week. Don't freeze.